Being underestimated was Captain Iona Kerr's favorite part of the job. It was a perk, a little bonus prize for being born a soft-skinned bipedal primate on a forgotten world of the galaxy's unfashionable western spiral arm. The constant low-grade condensation was the universe's way of handling you a stacked deck and then being genuinely surprised when you played your hand. The hangar of the Coalition flagship, the Vanguard, felt vast and judgmental. The recycled air tasted of sterilized metal, and the low resonating clicks from the Kelsier Honor Guard were the only sound. They stood in a rigid, intimidating line, their 9-foot-tall four-limbed frames encased in layered, fibrous plates of a dull, matte gray that seemed to swallow the light. They were magnificent, terrifying, and currently enjoying a private joke at her expense. As Iona walked down the ramp of the human transport, the Endeavor, her boots clanging on the metal, she caught the tail end of a low, rasping whisper from the ranking officer to a subordinate.
"Their primary weapon requires combustion."
The voice belonged to Sub-Commander Tethys, a specimen so perfectly imposing he looked like he had been grown in a lab to advertise the concept of martial superiority.
How quaint. Do they intend to give the Azkrath a mild rash?
Iona's smirk, already in place, widened by a millimeter. Oh, this was going to be fun. Behind her, her team, 50 of the human expeditionary force's finest, began hauling their gear. Crates of ammunition, rifles and hard cases, packs filled with everything from protein paste to well-worn paperbacks. They were quiet, professional, and utterly unintimidated by the alien giants watching them. They'd been trained by sergeants far more terrifying than a bunch of overgrown grasshoppers. Tethys stepped forward, each movement without waste, his body gliding into position. His deep-set, solid red optical sensors, which never seemed to blink, took in Iona's 5'7" frame, her worn fatigues, and the challenge in her gaze. He gave a slight, formal inclination of his head.
"Captain Iona Kerr, I presume. I am Sub-Commander Tethys. Welcome aboard the Vanguard. I have been tasked with your orientation."
His voice was a deep baritone, the words deliberate and resonant. "Sub-Commander," Iona said, offering the crisp salute she knew he wouldn't return. "Good to be here. Ready to get our gear stowed and find the mess hall. The boys are getting restless. Synthetics only go so far." The small filaments around Tethys' lipless mouth twitched, a sign of polite confusion.
"Your nutritional needs can be addressed after your equipment has been catalogued and secured. Coalition procedure is quite clear. I will escort you to the armory."
"Lead the way, big guy," Iona said, giving him a cheerful pat on one of his lower arms. It was like patting a statue. Tethys froze for a nanosecond, his posture stiffening as if she just violated a core tenet of his religion. Then, with rigid control, he turned and began to walk, his long limbs carrying him glidingly across the deck. Iona fell into step beside him, her team following in a disciplined column. The Kelsier watched them go, their silent clicks replaced by a stoic, unreadable watchfulness. Iona could feel the weight of their collective gaze. Apes with chemically propelled slingshots, a last desperate roll of the dice by a failing coalition. They couldn't wait to prove them wrong. The main armory of the Vanguard was less a room and more a testament to the Coalition's philosophy of, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. The chamber was vast enough to house a terrestrial football stadium and was filled with weapons that made Iona's inner engineer weep with a mixture of awe and pity. Tethys gestured with a sweeping hand at a weapon that took up an entire wall. It looked like a cannon had a baby with a particle accelerator and then fed it nothing but steroids. Conduits glowed with a steady blue light from within, and a low thrum of contained energy vibrated through the floor plates.
This, Captain, he announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, is a Takor Mach 4 plasma cannon. Its containment field can hold 10 million gigajoules of focused stellar plasma. In a 4-second discharge, it can liquefy a kilometer of nickel-iron asteroid.
Impressive, Iona said genuinely. What's its cycle time? The filaments around Tethys' mouth quivered, a subtle sign of irritation.
After a full discharge, the core requires just under 20 standard minutes to safely recharge and recalibrate.
20 minutes, Iona mused, loud enough for her team to hear. A lot can happen in 20 minutes. An Azkrath assault squad can cross a valley and be brewing coffee on your command deck in 10. Tethys chose to ignore the comment, his discipline absolute. He led her past rows of towering sonic resonators, racks of laser repeaters that looked like captured starship engines, and a particularly nasty-looking device labeled Graviton Shear. It was all magnificent. It was all high energy, and against the Azkrath, it was all utterly, heartbreakingly useless. He finally stopped at a small, conspicuously empty section of a wall near the service entrance. A few storage racks had been hastily welded into place. It was clearly an afterthought.
You may store your equipment here,
he said, the slight hesitation before equipment dripping with condescension. Iona's team began to uncase their gear, the movement swift and without waste. They stacked crates of ammunition and set their rifles in the racks. Their largest anti-material rifle looked like a child's toy next to the Takor cannon. Their standard-issue carbine seemed positively microscopic. Tethys pointed a long, sharp finger at a carbine.
And these are your primary contributions.
Iona's XO, a grizzled man named Harker, slammed a magazine into his rifle with a satisfying clack.
5.56 millimeter, full metal jacket. 30 rounds per mag, reliable as gravity.
Tethys' gaze drifted over the neatly arranged weapons. He catalogued them with a detached air that failed to hide his profound disappointment. He was looking at a museum exhibit, not an arsenal. Iona unholstered her heavily customized sidearm. It was sleek and polymer-framed, compact and deadly. She had nicknamed it the can opener. "This one," she said, patting its side with affection. "It's for special occasions. Don't worry, big guy. You'll know it when you see it." Tethys stared at the tiny weapon, then back at her. His solid red optical sensors betrayed no understanding of the joke.
Indeed. When you have concluded your unpacking, you may report to the mess. Follow the blue-lit corridor.
He turned and strode away, leaving the humans alone in their sad little corner of the magnificent, useless armory. Harker looked at Iona.
Well, that went well.
Exactly how I expected, Iona said, her grin returning in full force. He hasn't seen the fireworks yet. Dr. Gareth Adair was a man in love with physics. To him, the universe wasn't a cold, empty expanse. It was a beautiful, elegant machine governed by rules you could understand if you just understood the equations. And right now, he was trying to explain that to a room full of people who looked like they'd rather be undergoing root canal surgery without anesthetic. The Coalition Command was a grim affair. Seated around a massive holographic display table were the highest-ranking officers of the fleet, the stoic Kelshir, a trio of gruff-tusked Urtan admirals who looked like they were hewn from rock, a fluctuating energy-based delegate from the Lumina Concord, and a dozen other species, all of them wearing the same expression of weary despair. Adair, standing at a podium, gestured enthusiastically at a complex holographic model of laminated plating. You see, the Azkrath armor's biomechanical structure is a work of genius. I'll grant them that.
It's designed to diffuse energy. A plasma boat hits here.
He tapped the model, and a simulated energy blast splashed harmlessly across its surface.
And the impact is spread across the entire plate instantaneously. It's like trying to punch water. The energy has nowhere to concentrate, no single point of failure to exploit.
He beamed as if it was the most exciting news in the world.
But that's the key. It's all surface strength. It has incredible tensile and thermal resistance, but it's brittle. It has catastrophic internal shear vulnerability. It's critically susceptible to high-mass, high-velocity kinetic shocks.
Admiral Borask, lead Urton, leaned forward, his heavy jowls resting on his fist. He looked like a walrus that had just been told his favorite patch of ice had melted.
"Doctor,"
he grumbled, his voice a low rumble.
"You are the 5th new species, this rotation to promise us a miracle weapon based on your quaint planetary physics. The Phasians claim their focused sound waves would shatter the armor. The Decor swore their plasma would subliminate it. All of them were wrong."
"But it's different," Adair insisted, his cheerfulness unwavering. "They were still using energy. They were playing the Azcrath's game. We're not. We're introducing a different kind of force. A kinetic shockwave doesn't spread out like energy. It travels through the material. The plating is so rigid it can't flex to absorb the impact. It just shatters." Borask sighed, a sound like rocks tumbling in a chute.
"Dr. Adair, we appreciate your enthusiasm. We truly do. We are fighting a war, not funding a science fair. Your forces have been reviewed."
He tapped a control on his console.
"Captain Kerr's unit is assigned to Sector 94 Delta, patrol duty, standard reconnaissance. You will report any Azcrath movements to command and await support from a primary battle group."
In the back of the room, Iona's hands clenched into fist. Patrol duty. They were being sent to the galactic equivalent of a traffic cop post on a deserted highway. "Admiral, with all due respect," she began, stepping forward.
"Captain,"
Borask cut her off, his voice hardening.
"Your assignment is not a suggestion. The Coalition is grateful for your people's contribution, however limited it may be. Do not squander our goodwill. You are dismissed."
Adair looked crestfallen, his beautiful equations and elegant solutions dismissed without a second thought. Iona shot him a look that said, "Not yet." She turned, her movements stiff with anger, and marched out of the briefing room. Standing guard by the door, Subcommander Tethys maintained his stoic, dismissive posture. But for a fleeting moment, as Adair's presentation faded from the holographic table, his solid red sensors lingered on a chart showing a kinetic shockwave propagating through the laminated plating. The elegant geometry of it, the simple, brutal purity of the force vector. It was intriguing. He pushed the thought away. It was illogical. It was irrelevant. Iona and Adair were halfway down the corridor when a deep, baritone voice stopped them.
"Captain Kerr, Dr. Adair."
They turned. Tethys had followed them. He stood at a respectful distance, his posture still rigid, but his focus was entirely on them. "Subcommander," Iona said, her tone clipped. "Come to make sure we don't get lost on our way to the kiddie table?" Tethys ignored her barb. He addressed Adair directly.
"Doctor, your theory on kinetic shock propagation, while summarily dismissed by the Council, possesses a certain structural elegance, a logic that cannot be entirely discontinued without empirical data."
He paused. The filaments around his mouth moved in a thoughtful rhythm.
"I require more data. I wish to observe your unit's methods firsthand."
Adair blinked, surprised.
Well, of course.
The data is the most important part. I can show you the simulations, the material stress calculations.
Simulations are not evidence.
Tethys cut in, his gaze shifting to Iona.
I will be observing your people, Captain, to understand the practical application of this antiquated principle.
Iona studied him for a long moment. He wasn't mocking them now. He was a scientist in his own way. A warrior scientist who dealt in the observable and the proven. Fine by me, Sub-Commander, she said, a new plan already forming in her mind. Observe away. You might learn something. Tethys gave a short, sharp nod, then turned and strode away down the corridor, his purpose clear. He wasn't just their minder anymore. He was their auditor. The mess hall of the Vanguard was a chaotic, vibrant microcosm of the Coalition itself. The air was a thick soup of 100 different atmospheric preferences and the smells of 1,000 different digestive processes. From the ammonia tang of the calcium nutrient paste to the static discharge of the Lumina charging stations. Finding a compatible meal was a diplomatic challenge of its own. Iona and her team had claimed a corner, grimly working their way through blocks of human-issue protein paste that tasted vaguely of chicken-flavored cardboard. The mood was foul. In the corner of her eye, Iona saw Tethys enter the mess, retrieve a container of the cashier's vicious gray nutrient paste, and take a position at a standing terminal where he had a clear view of the human contingent. He was making no secret of his observation. Their pity party was interrupted by a loud, squawking laugh from a nearby table. A group of toroid pilots, feathered beings with sharp beaks and 2 sets of arms, were gesturing in their direction. The loudest of them, a flashy pilot named Chirax with crest feathers that shifted from blue to violet as he moved, leaned back on his stool. "Did you see them?" Chirax chirped, his voice carrying easily across the din. "The primitives and their little spark sticks. I hear they make a loud bang. Maybe we can use them for ceremonial salutes when we surrender." His cronies cackled. Iona's jaw tightened. Harker put a steadying hand on her arm.
"Let it go, Captain. They're not worth it."
"The hell they aren't," Iona muttered, pushing her chair back. She strode over to the droid's table, her shadow falling across Chirax. He looked up, his 4 eyes blinking. Something we can help you with, ground dweller?" he asked, his tone mocking. "Yeah," Iona said, her voice dangerously calm. "I'm a little tired of your species' primary contribution to the war effort being loud, obnoxious noises. Though I guess it makes sense, coming from a glorified sonic cannon." Chirax's feathers ruffled in agitation. "My Star Screamer can peel the plating off a destroyer at 5 clicks. What can your little pea shooter do? Scuff the paint?" "Let's find out," Iona said, leaning in. "An unsanctioned test. Your cannon against one of my rifles. Aft firing range, after the second shift. We take a piece of scavenged Azkrath armor. First one to put a meaningful scratch on it wins." Chirax's beak opened in a wide, incredulous grin. "A meaningful scratch. And what, pray tell, is the wager for this ridiculous contest?" "A week of my protein paste rations," Iona said without hesitation. The droids howled with laughter. "You're on, human. It will be a pleasure to watch you fail, and I will enjoy your disgusting food bricks." Iona gave him a thin smile. "Don't count your chickens before their paste feathers." She turned and walked back to her table. Adair looked at her, aghast. "Iona, you can't. That's a flagrant violation of Coalition regulations." "So was getting sent to patrol duty when we have the key to this whole damn war." She shot back, her eyes blazing. "Someone's going to listen to us. If they don't listen to reason, they'll listen to evidence, even if we have to make it ourselves." Across the mess hall, Tethys lowered his nutrient paste container. His observation had just yielded its first piece of significant data. The human captain was predictably insubordinate. His duty compelled him to report and prevent this. But his own stated mission to observe their methods compelled him to watch. The mission to gather data was now the more pressing directive. He would observe, then he would act. The aft firing range was a dead space after the second shift, a cavern of steel and silence, lit only by the dim red emergency lighting. A thick slab of Azkrath armor, salvaged from a recent wreck, was mounted on a test stand. It was about 2 meters square, its surface a patch of utter blackness in the dim light. It looked inviolable. Chirac swaggered in, followed by his entourage, hauling a portable version of his ship's sonic cannon. It was still the size of a small engine block, humming with contained power. "Prepare to be humiliated, human," he chirped, aiming the large bell-shaped emitter at the plate. "Just get on with it," Iona said, leaning against a bulkhead with her arms crossed. One of her men, Corporal Shaw, a quiet sharpshooter with nerves of steel, knelt nearby, his standard carbine resting on his knee. Chirac activated the cannon. A low hum escalated into a high-pitched, tooth-rattling whine. A wave of distorted air erupted from the emitter and slammed into the Azkrath plate. The sound was immense, a physical blow that made the deck plates vibrate. The air crackled. And then, silence. The armor plate shimmered faintly for a moment, then settled. It was completely unmarked. Not a scratch, not a scorch, nothing. It was a light show and nothing more. Chirac's crest feathers drooped. "That can't be. The resonance frequency should have... It must be a defective power cell." "Or your tech just sucks," Iona said flatly. "Shaw, your turn." Shaw didn't say a word. He sighted down his rifle, took a steadying breath, and squeezed the trigger. The sound was shockingly different. Not a grand, overwhelming roar, but a single, sharp, ear-splitting crack that echoed off the metal walls like a bullwhip. A tiny, supersonic piece of metal crossed the 20 meters to the target in an eye blink. The bullet didn't pierce the armor. It flattened on impact, a tiny splat of lead and copper. For a second, it looked like a failure. Then, a spiderweb of fine, white cracks erupted across the armor's surface, centered on the point of impact. More surprisingly, a chunk of the inner side of the plate, the side facing away from them, flaked off and clattered to the floor. It was a phenomenon known as spalling. Iona's team let out a low, victorious cheer. Chirac stared, his beak hanging open. It broke. Just as Shaw was about to stand, the main lights of the firing range flooded the room with harsh, white brilliance. Sub-Commander Tethys stood in the doorway, his towering frame casting a long, sharp shadow. His posture radiated a cold fury that was far more intimidating than any pteroid squawking.
"This is a direct violation of Coalition Command Regulation 81C9.
He stated, his voice a low threat.
"Unauthorized discharge of weaponry aboard a starship is grounds for immediate confinement and court-martial. You will all surrender your..."
He stopped mid-sentence. His gaze, sharp and analytical, had fallen on the damaged plate. He strode forward, ignoring the humans and Toroid alike, his long limbs eating up the distance. He stopped in front of the armor, his head tilted. He reached out a hand and gently, almost reverently, ran a fingertip over the spiderweb of cracks. It made a soft, scraping sound. His entire demeanor shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by an intense, focused study of the damaged plate. Tethys' official report was a masterpiece of Calshir understatement. It was dry, factual, and meticulously detailed the precise regulations Captain Kerr and her team had flagrantly violated. It listed every person present, the exact time of the incident, and the specific weapons discharged. Appended to the end of the 3-page report, almost as an afterthought, was a single high-resolution image of the Azkrath armor plate with a small red circle highlighting the spalling damage on the interior face. The report and its attached image landed on Admiral Borsak's desk like a small, dense grenade. High Command was furious. They were apologetic. A new species, barely in the Coalition for a standard month, had disregarded direct orders and conducted an unsanctioned weapons test on the flagship of the entire fleet. It was an insult. It was insubordination of the highest order. But they were also desperate, and that single, undeniable image of a cracked, spalled piece of unbreakable Azkrath armor was a siren song they couldn't ignore. A formal public demonstration was ordered. It was framed as a final evaluation, but everyone knew what it really was: a trial. The humans had to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that their claim was real. If they succeeded, they might just save the Coalition. If they failed, or if the first result was a fluke, Iona and her team would be facing a court-martial, and humanity's tenure in the Galactic Coalition would be short and humiliating. The aft firing range was no longer a deserted, shadowy space. It was packed. Admirals, tactical officers, and weapons specialists from a dozen species lined the observation gallery, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Admiral Boras stood front and center, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his face a thundercloud. A fresh, much larger slab of Azkrath hull plating, cut from the command cruiser that had glassed Ophiuchus D, was mounted on the main test stand. It was pristine, 20 centimeters thick, and mocked them with its invulnerability. Down on the range floor, Iona, Dr. Adair, and Corporal Shaw stood ready. Iona felt the weight of 100 alien eyes on her, the pressure of her entire species' reputation resting on her shoulders. She gave Shaw a reassuring nod. Adair, on the other hand, was practically vibrating with excitement. A kid on Christmas morning was about to unwrap the best present ever. Subcommander Tethys stood near the test plate, a data slate in hand. He had been appointed the official abjugator of the test. His red optical sensors were unreadable, his posture as rigid and formal as ever. But as he looked from the human team to the armor plate, Iona could have sworn she saw a flicker of anticipation in the way he angled his body toward the test. It was time to put up or shut up.
Let the demonstration begin.
Admiral Boras' voice boomed over the comm.
First, a control test. Calshir guard. Fire at will.
A Calshir soldier stepped forward, wielding a heavy plasma rifle. It was a scaled-down version of the armory's giant cannon, but still a formidable weapon. He fired. A brilliant orange bolt of plasma streaked across the range and slammed into the Azkrath plate. The impact was dazzling, a miniature sun blooming in the enclosed space. When the light faded, the plate was glowing cherry red at the point of impact. A beautiful molten scar marred its surface. But as it cooled over the next 30 seconds, the glow subsided, returning the plate to a dull, undamaged gray. There was no crack, no hole, no weakness. The armor had done its job perfectly. A low murmur of disappointment went through the alien observers. It was the result they had expected.
Human team,
Tethys announced, his voice flat.
you may proceed.
Shaw stepped up. He knelt, taking the same position as before, his carbine looking absurdly small in the vast, high-tech range. He fired. Crack! The sound was sharp, almost insignificant compared to the roar of the plasma rifle. The tiny 5.56 millimeter round hit the plate, and just like before, a spiderweb of cracks appeared and a fist-sized chunk of the inner face of the armor blew out, skittering across the deck. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the observation galley. This was no fluke. Admiral Boras leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Iona grinned. It was a sharp, predatory thing. That was the welcome, Mad Admiral, she said into her calm, her voice crisp and clear. A little knock on the door. Shaw, show him what the overkill means in human. Shaw set aside the carbine and picked up the anti-material rifle. The .50 caliber weapon was a beast, a solid chunk of steel and engineering. He chambered a single massive round, its tip painted a dull orange, a crush-head round. He took aim and fired. The crack, this time, was deafening, a physical concussion that slammed into everyone in the room. The crush-head round didn't try to pierce. As designed, it pancaked against the surface of the armor, spreading its plastic explosive payload over a wide area like a muddy cow patty. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the explosive detonated. It wasn't a piercing explosion, but a powerful, blunt shockwave. The entire back face of the armor plate blew inward with a deafening roar, spraying a massive cone of shrapnel across the back of the range. Where there had been a solid slab of armor, there was now a clean, gaping hole nearly a meter in diameter. The silence in the firing range was absolute. It was a silence born of pure, paradigm-shattering shock. Every alien in the gallery was staring, their various mouths, beaks, and orifices hanging open. Before they could recover, Iona drew her can opener from its holster, and for close encounters, she aimed at a clean section of the remaining plate and fired a 3-round burst. Pop, pop, pop. The reports were almost laughably quiet after the rifle's roar. The small caliber rounds didn't punch through, but where they hit, a tight cluster of deep, crater-like cracks appeared, a clear and undeniable weak point. The principle held, even at the smallest scale. The tiny guns worked. Dr. Gareth Adair stepped forward, practically levitating with vindicated energy. He tapped his wristcom, and a massive hologram sprang to life above the now violated armor plate, replaying the crush-head impact in stunning slow motion. "It's not magic," he declared, his voice ringing with the joyous certainty of a prophet whose predictions had just come true. "It's physics. Their armor is like a teardrop of molten glass dropped into cold water." He brought up an image of the classic science experiment, the teardrop-shaped glass, incredibly strong at its bulbous end, but with a tail that, when snapped, caused the entire structure to disintegrate. "Admiral Borask," Adair said, addressing the Urton directly, "you saw the plasma test. All that energy dissipated. Now, watch this." The hologram zoomed in on the impact. "There is almost no energy transfer. The heat is negligible. The force is different." "Explain," Boras rumbled, his voice tight. "The structural integrity should have held against the pathetic little pup." "Exactly," Adair beamed. "That's because you're all thinking about this war in terms of energy. For 10,000 years, the only existential threat the Azkrath have faced has been high-energy warfare from other advanced races. So they perfected their armor against it. They optimized to 100% of thermal and energy diffusion, sacrificing all other resistances. It's the pinnacle of over-specialization." The hologram slowed, the shockwave rippling through the plating. "The crush-head round doesn't just transfer energy, it transfers vibration, a specific, brutal frequency. The armor is a marvel of surface tension, but because of that, it has colossal internal stress. The chemical bonds are stretched to their absolute limit. We aren't piercing it, we're tricking it into destroying itself. The spalling you see is the armor becoming its own shrapnel." A Takor captain from the gallery spoke, her voice a series of melodic chimes translated by the ship's computer. "But this implies a weakness so fundamental. They travel the stars. They must encounter kinetic impacts, micrometeoroids. And the navigational deflectors handle those perfectly fine, Adair countered. But deflectors can be overwhelmed, and in a ground war against a foe that has completely abandoned energy weapons for hypervelocity rocks, is a context they never conceived. A cultural, biological, and technological blind spot. They solved a different equation. We just changed the test. Tethys, who had been silent, finally spoke. He lowered his data slate.
The proof is in the whole, Admiral,
he said. His voice, when he spoke, had lost all its earlier condescension. It was the sound of a convert. He looked at the gaping maw in the Azkrath plate, then at Iona. The filaments around his mouth quivered in a complex series of movements that Iona was beginning to decipher. It wasn't confusion or disapproval anymore. It was conviction. The second War Council meeting was nothing like the first. The atmosphere wasn't weary, it was electric. The scent of despair had been replaced by the tang of possibility.
The humans have identified a systemic, species-wide vulnerability in Azkrath technology.
Subcommander Tethys' voice, now a powerful instrument of advocacy, filled the chamber. He stood not as a guard, but as a presenter beside the holographic tank.
Their methods are unorthodox, their tools deceptively small, but their results are undeniable. The Azkrath are not invincible.
Admiral Borask nodded, his grim expression now one of intense focus.
We've seen a demonstration, but a hole in a plate is not a victory in a war. What are you proposing, Captain Kerr?
All eyes turned to Iona. She stepped forward, calm and collected. She tapped the console, and the map zoomed in on the Talos Reach, a key strategic choke point currently under Azkrath control. The old way is to pound the mountain until it crumbles, she said, her voice steady. That doesn't work. We've been trying to win a fist fight with an opponent who's wearing brass knuckles. It's time to stop punching and start thinking. The Azkrath CNC bunker for the entire sector is located deep inside the mountain. She pointed to a peak on the map. It's shielded against energy signatures, orbital bombardment, everything you can throw at it, but it still has to breathe. She zoomed in on the schematic, highlighting small, insignificant-looking thermal exhaust ports. We don't need to level the mountain. We just need to get one small team inside. We go in quiet, low-tech, under their sensor threshold. We get to the bunker's organic core, and we plant a charge. Not a big one, just a few shaped charges with crush head principles. We'll give the bunker a fatal case of internal bleeding. An Urtan captain scoffed.
Infiltrate the most heavily defended fortress in the sector? The Hunter Mechs patrol every canyon. We've lost entire armored columns trying to get within 100 clicks of that mountain.
Your armored columns run on fusion cores that light up Azkrath sensors like a supernova, Iona countered instantly. My team runs on protein paste. They'll be looking for a battleship. We'll be the ants they don't even see. Give me my team, and I'll decapitate their command structure in 12 hours. The plan hung in the air, audacious and insane. It was Tethys who stepped forward again.
Admiral, if I may.
He manipulated the holographic tank. The map of Talos Pass expanded, showing coalition fleet dispositions on the perimeter.
The captain's plan, while high risk, is not a lone gamble. It is the key that unlocks a broader strategy.
He highlighted two massive coalition battle groups, the First and Third Fleets, currently holding a defensive line.
These fleets are bleeding ships every day in a battle of attrition they cannot win. But if Captain Kerr is successful, the Azkrath fleet in this sector will be momentarily headless. Their command network will be severed for a period of approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Their ships will revert to localized command, and their coordination will shatter.
He drew lines of attack on the map.
In that window, the First Fleet can execute a pincer movement here, cutting off their retreat. The Third Fleet can push directly through the center, exploiting the chaos. A successful decapitation strike doesn't just destroy a bunker. It creates the decisive moment for the entire fleet. It turns a meat grinder into a rout.
The room was silent, the council members staring at the tactical overlay. It connected a crazy raid to a viable strategy. Admiral Boras stared at the map, then at Iona, a long, appraising stare. Finally, a slow, dangerous grin spread across his tusked face.
It's insane, he grumbled, but every sane plan we've had has led to a graveyard. Your insane idea is the first one backed by physical proof and a logical exploitation strategy.
He slammed a heavy fist on the table.
Captain Kerr, your plan is authorized. Tethys, you are right to bring this to my attention. Make them bleed.
The air in the transport bay was thick with the smells of gun oil, adrenaline, and nervous energy. Assault Team Keystone moved with quiet, focused purpose. They checked their gear, loaded their magazines, and synced their low-power comms. Iona was doing a final check on Shaw's anti-material rifle when a towering shadow fell over her. She looked up. It was Tethys, clad in a segmented, matte-black Kalshir combat harness, a compact plasma rifle secured to his back.
The High Command has deemed it prudent for a coalition liaison to accompany your team,
he stated formally,
to facilitate interspecies tactical coordination. I have been assigned this duty.
Iona noticed a small, cylindrical device attached to his harness that she hadn't seen before. "What's that toy?" she asked, pointing.
It is a Class 3 EM projector,
Tethys replied without looking down.
Standard issue for my rank. For disabling automated defense systems without triggering system-wide alarms. A logical precaution when infiltrating an unknown technological environment.
Iona grinned, tossing him a spare human-sized comms unit. It looked like a child's toy in his massive three-fingered hand. "Welcome to the Rock Throwers Club, big guy. Try to keep up." Tethys fumbled with the small controls for a moment, his brow ridges furrowed in concentration. He finally managed to clip it to his harness, his expression one of grim focus.
My combat chassis is rated for 80 kilometers per hour over rough terrain. I believe I will manage, Captain.
"It's not about speed," Iona said, shouldering her rifle. "It's about being a ghost." She plugged her own comm into the port on her helmet. "Adair, you patched in?" Dr. Adair's cheerful voice came back, crisp and clear from the Vanguard's command center. Dr. Adair's cheerful voice came back, crisp and clear from the Vanguard's command center.
Loud and clear, Captain. I've got a direct feed from your team's sensor suit. I'll be your eyes and ears in the sky. Oh well, in orbit. Try not to break anything I can't analyze from up here.
No promises, Professor, Iona said. She clapped Tethys on the shoulder plate. "Let's go haunt some Azkrath." Talos Pass was a nightmare landscape of jagged, rust-colored rock under the light of a swollen purple gas giant. The canyons twisted and turned, a maze designed to funnel attackers into kill zones. But Assault Team Keystone wasn't attacking. They were flowing. To Tethys, it was a revelation. He was used to the Kalshir way of war. Overwhelming force, precise formations, the thunderous advance of an armored column. The humans moved like water. They flowed through the shadows, using the terrain with an instinctual grace he had never witnessed. Energy reading spike 2 clicks ahead, bearing 095. Adair's voice crackled in their ears, consistent with a Hunter-class energy signature on a standard patrol route. Iona held up a fist, and the entire team froze, melting into the terrain. Tethys flattened himself behind a rocky outcrop, his large frame surprisingly adept at concealment. An Azkrath hunter mech appeared on the ridge above them. It was a terrifying machine, a 10-meter-tall biomechanical predator that walked on 2 powerful, reverse-jointed legs. Its plating seemed to absorb the dim light, and its head, a sensor-studded turret, swiveled, scanning for threats. It passed right over their position, its powerful sensors sweeping the area and finding nothing of interest. It continued its patrol, its heavy footfalls fading into the distance. Tethys let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They had been utterly invisible.
He didn't even twitch.
Harker whispered over the comm.
He's looking for a fusion reactor, not a handful of heartbeats.
Adair replied.
You're below his nose floor. Keep it that way.
A few canyons later, they encountered another hunter, this one patrolling the canyon floor. There was no way around it. Iona didn't hesitate. She gave it a rapid series of silent hand signals. On a ledge to her left, Shaw brought his anti-material rifle to bear. On her right, another sniper, a woman named Rena, did the same. They weren't aiming for the heavily armored torso or the head. They were aiming for the joints. Iona gave a sharp, downward chop of her hand. Two nearly simultaneous cracks shattered the silence. They were shockingly loud in the enclosed space. Two tungsten-core sabot rounds, needles of hyperdense metal traveling at over 5 times the speed of sound, slammed into the hunter's left knee joint. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The armor, never designed for such a focused high-mass impact, didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The internal biomechanics, the grown sinew of bone-like supports, shredded themselves. The hunter's leg buckled with a wrenching, grinding screech. The massive war machine spasmed, its weapon systems firing wildly into the cannon walls. It took 2 lurching, unstable steps, then collapsed onto its side with a titanic crash of metal and plating that shook the very ground. It lay there, twitching, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Tethys stared, his own plasma rifle still raised and unfired. He had been prepared for a protracted fight, for a tactical exchange of energy blast. He had watched this thing shrug off direct units from Erton battle tanks, and 2 small, solid projectiles had just turned it into a pile of scrap.
By the shattered moons,
he breathed, his voice filled with awe.
It just fell apart.
Iona moved past him, patting him on the shoulder plate as she went. Told you. Indigestion. Let's move. We're on the clock. The ventilation shaft was tight, dark, and smelled of metallic dust and damp soil. It led them deep into the mountain, directly into the Azkrath command and control bunker. The breach was silent, a simple matter of prying open a grate. They dropped into the bunker's interior, weapons ready.
Captain, my readings are wild,
Adair's voice whispered in their ears.
High humidity, complex organ compounds, complex high humidity, complex organic compounds, and thousands of discrete mobile biosignatures. No life forms larger than a human fist.
The interior was not a military installation in any way they understood. It was a warm, humid, cavernous space that felt more like a terranium than a fortress. The walls pulsed with a soft, organic light, and the air was thick with the scent of strange chlorophyll. It was swarming. Thousands upon thousands of beetle-sized biomechanical constructs skittered across the floors, walls, and ceiling. They were the bunker's crew, its maintenance staff, its very immune system, and they had detected an infection. The swarm converged, a flowing carpet of black, clicking bodies.
They're ignoring me,
Tethys reported, his Kalshir energy signature apparently not registering as a primary threat.
They are focusing on your chemical-based power packs.
The tiny serrated mouths of the constructs began chewing at their gear. Sparks flew as they bit into wiring.
They're on the demo pack,
Shaw yelled, wrestling the primary explosive charge away as a cluster of the things chewed through his outer casing.
The detonator wiring is severed. Cover him!
Iona ordered, firing her rifle into the mass. The bullets tore through them, but it was like shooting at a river. For every one she killed, 100 more took its place. The swarm began crawling up their legs.
This is not a viable tactical solution.
Tethys boomed, battling a wave of them with his rifle stock.
Working on it.
Shaw grunted, his fingers frantically working inside the Demopack's panel, trying to splice the delicate wires while creatures swarmed over his gloves.
Almost there. Damn it. Another one's through. Iona, their shells have a high metallic content.
Adair's voice cut through the chaos.
The network. It's a hive intelligence, but it's hardwired.
That was the key. Tethys saw the sparks from Shaw's frantic repairs, heard Adair's analysis.
They are conductive,
he shouted. He ripped the Class 3 EM projector from his harness. He slammed the activator. A silent, invisible pulse of electromagnetic energy washed through the chamber. The effect on the swarm was immediate and total. Every single one of the beetle-like constructs convulsed, their internal circuitry shorting out. They rained down from the walls and ceiling, dropping to the floor in a thick, inert blanket. A beat of stunned silence.
That pulse was a raw discharge at maximum yield,
Tethys announced, his voice urgent.
The projector is fried, and the effect may not be permanent. Estimate 60 seconds until they can reboot their primary functions.
Shaw, now!
Iona yelled.
Done!
Shaw shouted, slamming the panel and the charge shut.
It's armed. Plan it and go! Go!
The team scrambled, slapping the charge onto the bunker's pulsating organic core. They set the timer for 2 minutes and sprinted back the way they came, leaving the now twitching carpet of constructs behind them. On the bridge of his flagship, the Hegemony, High Sovereign Malachor watched his empire crumble in real time. The tactical display, once a serene map of glorious conquest, was now a cascade of red alerts and broken data streams. The Talos front had gone dark. His command signals were unanswered. His hunter battalions were reporting catastrophic structural failures, one after another, falling like diseased cattle. His tactical officer, a lesser Ashcraft caste with quivering antennae, displayed a fragmented image from a dying hunter's sensor feed, a tiny, almost invisible flash of light from a canyon wall, followed by its own system diagnostic screaming about an unscheduled leg disassembly.
Report!
Malachor roared, his voice a biological boom that vibrated through the bridge.
What pathogen infects our sacred halls? What weapon can bypass the divine plating? This is a corruption of physical law, an architectural heresy.
A new alert flashed, crimson and urgent. The Talos CNC bunker was gone. Not just offline. Gone. An internal explosion of impossible force, and now the coalition fleets, the ones that had been cowering for months, were surging forward, a coordinated, perfectly timed attack. It was as if they knew. It was blasphemy. The coalition fleet rounded the now headless Ashcraft forces. It was a massacre. With their command structure shattered, the Ashcraft ships fought without coordination, their impenetrable armor useless when their fleets could be outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. Iona and Tethys led a joint human-Kalshir boarding party onto Malachor's flagship. They fought through corridors filled with enraged but disorganized Ashcraft warriors, human ballistics cracking shells, and Kalshir plasma clearing the way. It was a brutal, effective partnership. They stormed the bridge. The remaining Ashcraft crew were quickly subdued. High Sovereign Malachor stood alone, cornered against his massive, throne-like command chair. He was magnificent and terrible, a 10-foot giant of muscle and bioarmor radiating an aura of pure, undiluted fury. He stared at the tiny human captain, then at the towering Kalshir beside her. His pride, his entire worldview, could not process this humiliation.
Sir, the insects have learned to bite,
he hissed, his eyes burning with contempt.
You think you've won. You have won nothing. You have merely purchased a tomb.
He spun, not towards them, but towards his command throne. His hand shot out towards a recessed, glowing red panel set into its arm.
If I am undone, this vessel becomes my pyre and yours.
he never made it. Tethys was a blur of gray plating, faster than a human eye could track. He closed the distance, sidestepping Malicor's lunge. It wasn't a clumsy blow, but a single precise strike with the edge of his hand to a nerve cluster at the base of the Sovereign's thick neck. A move of pure Kalshir martial arts designed to induce total systemic paralysis. Malicor's system seized. His lunge faltered, his outstretched hand falling inches from the panel. He collapsed to the deck, his massive body hitting the floor with a heavy thud. He was paralyzed but conscious, his eyes wide with shock and utter humiliation. From the floor, helpless, he glared up at the two warriors standing over him. He rasped, his voice a weak gargle.
How? Your energy weapons are useless. Show me this heretical weapon that has undone the work of gods.
Iona's smirk was pure, uncut victory. They looked down at the fallen sovereign, the architect of 1,000 genocides, now helpless on the floor of his own bridge. She ejected the magazine from her can-opener sidearm with a flick of her thumb. It clattered to the deck. She reached in and thumbed out a single, unspent round. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger, pinching it for the paralyzed sovereign to see. It was a 5.7 by 28 millimeter round, a tiny, brass-cased cylinder with a small copper-jacketed slug at its tip. It looked absurdly, comically small. The instrument of an empire's downfall. It's called science, sweetheart, Iona said, her voice dripping with irony. A moment later, Dr. Adair's cheerful voice cut in over the boarding party's open comm channel, broadcasting across the bridge for all to hear.
And gravity. Don't forget gravity, Captain. It does most of the heavy lifting, really. It's all just applied Newtonian mechanics when you get right down to it.
Malicor stared at the tiny bullet, the insignificant little piece of metal that represented his utter and complete humiliation. His eyes burned with a hatred so pure it was almost a physical force, but he could not move a muscle as Coalition soldiers moved in to cuff him. The mess hall of the Vanguard was pandemonium. It was a joyous, chaotic riot. Species that wouldn't normally share the same atmosphere were clanking mugs and glasses, slapping each other on the back, or the closest equivalent appendage, and attempting to sing their various species' victory anthems all at once. The humans were at the center of it all, being hoisted on shoulders, offered drinks that smoked and bubbled, and generally being treated like the conquering heroes they were. In a quieter corner of the observation deck, overlooking the celebration, Iona was nursing a bottle of suspiciously potent toroid liquor she'd won off Churax. A tall shadow fell over her. Tethys stood there, his posture relaxed for the first time she'd ever seen him. He was holding Corporal Shaw's 50 caliber anti-material rifle, but it was different now. Kalshir artisans had been at work. The rifle's stock and barrel, once plain, functional steel, were now meticulously engraved with glowing geometric patterns of Kalshir design. The patterns depicted the Battle of Talos Pass, small human figures moving through canyons, a hunter mech collapsing, the final assault on the CNC bunker. It was no longer just a tool of war. It was a work of art, a story told in metal and light.
Our engineers and artists studied it,
Tethys said, his deep voice filled with a genuine admiration that resonated more than any formal commendation.
They cannot replicate its elegant simplicity, the precise chemistry of the propellant, the metallurgy of the projectile. It is a testament to a path we never walked, a mastery of physical sciences born from limitations we never had.
He offered the heavy rifle to her, holding it with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics.
We have much to learn from you. Please accept this, an honored weapon for an honored warrior.
Iona took the rifle. It was heavy in her hands, a perfect fusion of brutal human function and elegant Kelshir art. She ran a thumb over the glowing engravings, a slow grin spreading across her face. "Wow, you guys really went to town on this," she said, hefting it to her shoulder and sighting down the barrel at a distant nebula. "You do know its primary function is making loud noises and breaking things, right?" She raised her bottle. 2 tiny guns. Tethys picked up a glass of viscous, shimmering blue fluid from a nearby console. He raised it, the gesture slow and deliberate.
"And 2 big ideas,"
he rumbled. They clinked their respective containers. Iona's rough glass bottle against Tethys' delicate, fluted glass.